This is Mr. Eugene, and today we're talking about something that doesn't get discussed honestly in spaces built for men. Not the anger, not the bitterness, not the strategies for moving on that don't actually work. We're talking about the real emotional work of letting go of someone who mattered to you, someone who hurt you, someone who took years of your life and left you holding damage you didn't create. Because here's what I've observed watching men navigate the aftermath of painful relationships. The ones who struggle most are not the weak ones. They're the ones who loved genuinely, who invested fully, who gave everything they had to something that ultimately failed or was taken from them. Good men struggle to let go because they loved well, and that's worth saying clearly before anything else. But struggling to let go has a cost, a serious cost. Every day you remain emotionally entangled with someone who's gone is a day of your remaining life consumed by something that is finished. Every morning you wake up still carrying the weight of her. The resentment, the confusion, the unanswered questions, the replaying of what went wrong is a morning that belongs to your past instead of your present. And men over 50 don't have mornings to waste. None of us do. But especially not men who've already spent decades building for others and are now finally in a position to build for themselves. So today I'm telling you the only way good men actually let go. And I'll warn you now. It's not what most men expect to hear. It's not what most men want to hear initially. But it's the only thing that actually works. And I know this not from theory, but from watching men who were completely consumed by bitterness and resentment find their way through to genuine peace and freedom. Let me start by explaining why most of what men try doesn't work. The most common approach men take after a painful relationship is anger. They stay angry, feed the anger, justify the anger, surround themselves with content and conversations that validate and amplify the anger. And the anger feels productive, feels like strength, feels like you're protecting yourself from ever being hurt that way again, feels like appropriate response to genuine betrayal. But here's what anger actually does emotionally: it keeps you attached. Anger is not the opposite of love. Indifference is the opposite of love. Anger is still a form of intense emotional connection to someone. When you're angry at her constantly, thinking about what she did, replaying the betrayal, rehearsing what you should have said, cataloging her failures and cruelties, you are spending enormous emotional energy on her every single day. She is still at the center of your emotional life, still consuming your mental space, still dictating your internal experience, just negatively instead of positively. You haven't let go. You've just changed the emotion you're clinging with. The man who cannot stop thinking about how much he hates what she did is just as emotionally bound to her as the man who cannot stop thinking about how much he misses her. Both men are consumed. Both men are not free. Both men are still giving her their days. The second thing men try is distraction, staying busy, working constantly, filling every hour so there's no space for the feelings to surface. New hobbies, new social life. Sometimes new women immediately. Distraction works for moments, sometimes for weeks, but it doesn't resolve anything. It postpones the emotional work without doing it, and postponed emotional work accumulates with interest. The man who never genuinely processed his first serious loss carries it into his second relationship, his third, his fourth. Each unprocessed loss adding weight until he's carrying decades of unresolved pain that colors everything he experiences and everyone he encounters. Staying busy is not letting go. It's just not sitting still long enough to feel what needs to be felt. The third thing men try is justification, building the case against her, cataloging every wrong she did, every way she failed him, every lie she told, every way she was difficult or unreasonable or unfair, essentially constructing a thorough argument for why she deserved to lose him. This feels like clarity, feels like seeing things accurately. Sometimes it even is seeing things accurately. She may have genuinely done terrible things. The case against her may be completely valid. But building and rebuilding and reinforcing that case keeps her at the center of your thinking. You cannot construct an argument about someone without thinking about them constantly. The case against her is still a case about her, and as long as she's the subject of your primary internal narrative, you haven't moved on. You've just moved into a different room of the same prison. So if anger doesn't work, distraction doesn't work, and justification doesn't work, what does? Here is the answer that most men don't want to hear initially. The only way to genuinely let go of someone is through a form of acceptance that eventually becomes something close to compassion. Not forgiveness in the sense of excusing what happened, not pretending the damage wasn't real, not minimizing what she cost you or how she treated you, not reconciliation or renewed contact or any of that. Simply releasing the emotional grip, unclenching from the memory of her. And the only thing that allows that unclenching is softening rather than hardening. Let me explain why this is true psychologically. Negative emotions, resentment, bitterness, anger, hatred, they cause you to emotionally clench around the object of those emotions. Think about what happens physically when you're angry. Your body tightens, your jaw clenches, your fists close, your shoulders rise, everything contracts and grips. The same thing happens emotionally. Bitterness and resentment create emotional clenching around whoever you're bitter and resentful toward, and you cannot release something you are simultaneously gripping. The physical equivalent is trying to throw something while your fist is closed. You cannot release what you're clenching. You have to open your hand to let it go. The same is true emotionally. Letting go requires emotional opening, softening. And what creates that softening is not more anger, not harder justification, not busier distraction. It's a gradual, deliberate, often difficult cultivation of something warmer toward the person you're trying to release. Now, before the resistance rises, let me address what this is not. This is not saying what she did was acceptable. It wasn't. This is not saying you should have stayed or tried harder. You shouldn't have. This is not saying she deserves your warmth or your well-wishing. She may not. This is not about her at all. This is entirely about you, about your freedom, about reclaiming your emotional life from someone who already took enough of your actual life. When you carry bitterness towards someone, you are not punishing them. She is not lying awake feeling your resentment. She is not suffering because you haven't forgiven her. She has moved on, or she's consumed by her own chaos, or she's completely indifferent to your internal state. Your bitterness is not touching her. It's only touching you. Every day, every morning, every quiet moment when the thoughts come back. You are the only one being punished by your inability to let go, and that punishment continues for as long as you choose to maintain the grip. So, how does a man actually do this? What does it look like practically? It starts with a decision, a deliberate, conscious decision that you are going to stop feeding the resentment. Not because she deserves it, because you deserve better than spending the rest of your life consumed by someone who is already gone. This means stopping the rehearsal. Every time you catch yourself replaying what she did, rebuilding the case against her, imagining what you should have said, you consciously redirect, not to suppress it, to recognize it and choose differently. You are not going to think about that right now. You are going to think about what you're building instead. This is harder than it sounds. The mind returns to painful grooves automatically, especially at night, especially in quiet moments. Especially when something triggers the memory, the work is in the redirecting, consistently, patiently, without judging yourself for the thoughts returning. The second step is finding something genuinely true and good about what the relationship gave you, even if the ending was terrible, not to rewrite history, not to minimize the damage, but to acknowledge that something real existed before it went wrong. Maybe you became a father because of that relationship and your children are the best thing in your life. Maybe you built something together that taught you what you're actually capable of. Maybe the pain of losing it clarified what you genuinely value in ways nothing else could have. Finding that truth is not weakness. It's accuracy. And accuracy is always more useful than distortion in either direction, either pure bitterness or pure idealization. The third step is the hardest and the most powerful, beginning slowly and imperfectly to move toward wishing her well. Not enthusiastically, not immediately, but moving in that direction, not because she deserves it, because you need to unclench, because the emotional grip you're maintaining is costing you your peace, because the only way to open your hand and release what you've been carrying is to stop wanting it to suffer and start being genuinely indifferent to what happens to it. Wishing her well doesn't mean she was right, doesn't mean you were wrong, doesn't mean you want any contact or connection. It means you're releasing your emotional investment in her outcome, removing her from the center of your internal life, freeing yourself from the need for her to suffer or fail or regret in order for you to feel okay. When you genuinely no longer need her to regret what she did in order to feel at peace, you are free. That is the moment of actual release. A man I know spent 4 years after his divorce consumed by bitterness toward his ex-wife. 4 years. She had been genuinely difficult, genuinely unfair in how the marriage ended. He had legitimate grievances. His anger was understandable. But 4 years later, he was still the one living inside that anger every day. She had moved on, he had not. He was 58 years old, and the best years of whatever remained of his life were being consumed by a woman who was no longer even present. The shift for him came when someone asked him a simple question. What would your life look like right now if you had spent the last 4 years building something instead of nursing the resentment? He couldn't answer it. Because he hadn't built anything. He had spent 4 years in the same emotional place he was in the day she left. That question broke something open in him. He started the process of releasing, not for her, for himself. For the years he still had. For the man he could still become if he stopped letting her occupy the space that belonged to his future. 2 years later, he told me he genuinely wished her well. Not dramatically, not with lingering feeling, just quietly. The way you might feel about a stranger having a decent life. Indifferent, but not hostile. Free. And in those 2 years, he had built more, grown more, experienced more genuine peace than in the entire 4 years of bitterness that preceded them. That is what letting go actually produces. Not just absence of pain, presence of something better. Space that was previously occupied by resentment now available for building, for living, for genuine experience of whatever time remains. Men over 50 who are carrying old pain need to hear this clearly. The years ahead of you are genuinely valuable. More valuable than the years behind you in certain ways because you have clarity and experience you didn't have then. You know what matters, you know what doesn't. You know what you actually want from whatever time remains. But none of that clarity is accessible while you're still emotionally occupied by the past. The resentment doesn't just hurt, it blocks. It fills the space where your actual life is waiting to happen. Letting go is not a gift to her. It is not absolution. It is not weakness or surrender or pretending things were fine when they weren't. It is the reclamation of your own emotional life, the repossession of your own mental space. The decision that she has taken enough and you are taking the rest back for yourself. The anger is understandable. The bitterness is human. The resentment is completely natural given what many men in this audience have been through. But none of it is free. All of it costs you something every single day. And the cost compounds quietly until you look up one day and realize you've spent years of your life still paying a debt to someone who left a long time ago. You've paid enough. The account is settled. Whatever she owes you in terms of acknowledgement, apology, or regret, you are never going to collect it. That collection is not coming. And waiting for it is the mechanism keeping you trapped. Release the debt. Not because she deserves it, because carrying it is destroying you and she isn't even feeling the weight. Open your hand. Let it go. Reclaim what's left. Build what's possible. Live what's remaining. That is the only way good men let go. And it is worth every difficult step of getting there. Men, how many of you are still carrying something from a relationship that ended years ago? How much of your daily mental and emotional energy is still going to someone who is already gone? Subscribe for the honest conversations about what it actually takes for good men to heal, rebuild, and live well after everything they've been through.